everybody, this is Preeti. Welcome to Stamp Along with Rubbernecker. Today I'm showcasing a card which uses a lot of textures. I'm just going to show you how to add textures on your cards. So there are different products that are available there in the market to create textures. There are embossing pastes like this one right here. It's just a very thick white paste that you can use with your stencil or even just plain just like that to create textures. And then there's also different kinds of texture pastes, like the one that I showed earlier. That's a crackled texture paste, or there is this gold flakes, and of course there are what you call the gemstones that you can use, and then there are embossing powders, different kinds of embossing powders. There's also the glitter paste, which is like the embossing paste, but it has glitter added in it. But for today's card, I'm going to show you, we're going to use a lot of glitter. We're going to use embossing powders. Now, most of us do have embossing powders in our stash, and we all have glitter. I think we all have glitter. And that's the reason why I chose those two different elements to create textures. And the stamp set I'm using are these two stamp sets. One is called the Winter Wonderland, and the other one is called Winter Friends. So we're going to start off this card using a watercolor cardstock because I'm going to use water eventually. Or watercolors eventually. So I'm starting off with a watercolor. So I'm just putting this into my Misty stamping tool here, and then I'm going to just use some embossing buddy, and this is so that the embossing powder doesn't stick anywhere else other than where I want it to be. And then I'm going to place these pine cones, pine branches all over these cardstock, and I'm going to emboss it using the embossing powder that I've chosen for this particular card. So I'm just using a paper filter, a coffee filter you can see there, just to catch all the embossing powder. And I'm using two shades of blue embossing powder. Now this embossing powder has glitter in it. So when the embossing powder melts, the glitter, what do you say? It gets caught inside the embossing liquid or whatever that is, and you have that really glittery shiny effect left behind. And then I'm going to use a lighter blue shade of embossing powder as well to create some lighter pine cones, not pine cones actually, pine branches for my surface. So my idea was to create these pine branches like they're coming from the top, like you're at the bottom and you're looking up towards the pines, so they're looking towards you, or that was the whole idea of creating the way I channel or plan this card to look like. So now I'm taking a brown cardstock that you can see here, and I'm going to stamp the pine cones that are in the same stamp set called the Winter Wonderland, and I'm going to stamp and emboss this again using another specialty embossing powder, and this is white with some gold what do you call gold I'm not getting words today, sorry about that, glitter in it. And then again, when you heat set it, you can see the white pine cones right there. And then all I did is I fussy cut those pine cones, which I'll use later. Now I'm taking these opaque, like it's a really grainy embossing powder. And embossing powder comes in different grains. There is a really fine grain, and then there's a little grainier ones, and I'm using this grainier embossing powder, and I'm just sprinkling it on the cardstock, and I'm keeping the heat gun running so that it melts as I keep adding it or sprinkling that embossing powder. And what it does, it just melts a few of them, and some of them just blow away. And then when I add watercolor on it, it'll resist it. So it'll almost look like snow falling down from the sky. And you'll see as this watercolor starts building up. So I'm taking this Ken Oliver watercolors that are available in the Rubbernecker store, and I'm starting off. I actually showed you two blue shades, but actually I used only one of the blue shades, and that was the darkest one. But I didn't quite like the blue that it was, so I added some black to it to create a more deeper tone of blue. So now I'm just spritzing my watercolor cardstock with water, and then I'm just starting to lay that watercolor. And you can see that watercolor, because we have added so much of embossing at the bottom, the embossed elements resist that water. So I'm just going to keep adding the colors as I please. And I want it to fade down to a lighter shade at the bottom and the dark to be on the top. So I'm going to do this multiple times. And as I'm doing it, I'm also going to heat set it so that I don't have that darker shade coming downwards. So I wanted a little more darkness to that color. So I added some more black to the blue ink, and then I again heat set that. And you can see how beautifully it resists that watercolor. Now that I'm done with that, I want to add a few more branches, so it's more like few more layers of branches, but this time I'm not using embossing powder. Instead, I'm using my color fuse ink, and the color fuse ink, the color that I want is not there. So what I did is I just added the green color, and then I went with the blue on it, and it kind of gave a very deep aqua shade of color for the pine branches, and I really like that tone. So that's another thing. You can definitely mix your colors on your stamp before you stamp it. So you can see now those branches are peeking through that. And now we're going to use this mica glitter. Now, if you don't have a mica glitter, you can definitely use regular glitter and it'll work beautifully. So I'm just adding some glue onto this scrap cardstock, and I'm just pouncing it all over the place because I don't want to be blobs. I want it to be spread out. So I'm just pouncing it all over the surface. And then once I'm done pouncing I'm just going to flatten it with my fingers, and then again I'm going to take this coffee filter to catch any of those powder, and I'm just going to lay this mica flakes all over it, and that's going to give this effect like a snowy effect as if lights hitting the snow and the snow is sparkling. So that was the whole idea of creating this particular scene that I have come up with. Anyway, so now that everything is adhered to the surface, you can see I'm just pressing it down so there's nothing popping out. And then I'm going to place the pine cones on the surface. The pine cones, as I said earlier, I did emboss them and then I die cut them, and you can see the close up of this. It's so sparkly. Actually, the video doesn't do justice at all, but it's really sparkly. Oh, this is a little vacuum cleaner that I have on my desk, which I used to just clean up those little glittery things that goes all over the place. So I just wanted to show you that. Anyway, so here are the pine cones that I had embossed and die cut. Not die cut. I don't. There are dies available. I do not have them with me, so I just fussy cut them. So I'm just going to place these pine cone all over the branches, and I, it just turned out so beautiful. I really like the colors, the blue colors, the texture, the background, and then these pine cones popping on top of it. It almost looks like a low branch, and you're right underneath the tree, and you can see the snow-covered pine cones from under the tree, and and the night sky with the snow falling, the glistening of the snow cones. It just looks marvelous. It's just let your imagination take you to that place, and you can start imagining what I'm imagining. Anyway, so I'm just going to place these, and I'm going to use liquid glue for this. I'm not going to use foam adhesive. You could do that, but I think foam adhesive would not adhere above all those textures so well. So I'm just directly adding them onto this panel using just some liquid glue. Now it's time to add the sentiment, and for the sentiment I chose the sentiment from the Wintery Friends stamp set, and it's called Warm Thoughts Coming Your Way on a Wintry Day. And this is a beautiful sentiment for this particular card, and I just went ahead and cut it, stamped it using a black ink on a white cardstock, and I cut it into a smaller size. And now I'm just adding some foam adhesive behind this one because I wanted it to be sitting above the pine cones, so that's the reason why I added foam adhesive to this. And I just placed it on that place, and because I'm using a white base, it made sense to have a little white on the cardstock just to pull in that color a bit. And then I'm just going to add some fun foam behind this panel because I wanted to lay flat on my card, and I wanted to make sure that there was no buckling in it because I'd added water. There was a lot of warping, but adding this fun foam behind it made it quite sturdy and stable and even surface. And once I was done adhering this to the note card, the card was pretty much done. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you will give texture a go on your cardstock. Please give us a thumbs up if you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we'd love to see your work on a Rubbernecker Facebook fan club channel as well. You have a wonderful day. Bye bye.